I never had a problem with empathy. As a matter of fact, um, I I I think that was a coping mechanism that a lot of victims of childhood sexual abuse have, is that they become very sensitive to how other people feel because we're always trying to negotiate our own safety. And so the way you do that is by paying close attention to how other people feel. But for a while there, after I lost my license, I really I was completely out of touch with my empathy. Like I, and when I realized that, it really frightened me. It was like a part of me was missing, and it's coming back. It's reawakened, but
It's
I
interesting
wonder.
that the other thing here is women are wired with a bigger limbic system, so they're more likely to empathise, and they do it for bonding. We've just got the wiring for that automatically. We can love the ugliest little monkey baby that we give birth to, and we think the most beautiful, beautiful baby on the planet to us, and you know we're given that. We're given that. We're love machines. Women are love machines. That's all we want to do, isn't it? Be protected and love, and we do. We want to look to a man and just love him. I mean, we do. We want to.
Yes,
All
well,
right.
sure. That we're wired that way, right? We're wired to
Yeah.
want,
Yeah.
it's depending clearly on your orientation, but we're all wired to want to love someone, right? At least one person, we want to love them completely. So, yeah, I, it's just so fascinating how it can all go so terribly wrong.
I know. And you know what? I can't wait to get into the preschools and teach 3-year-old boys to empathise so they don't go on and bully at all, whether it's boys or girls. I want to prevent bullying. I want to prevent harm of another human. And that's what I want. I want to have more love between humans. And I think that empathizing, it's not something that we're just, some of us are born with it, and I think others have to actually live the experience to understand it. And I think that that's going to be a part of what helps us breed better humans, especially better boys, not using their boyness to dominate.
I agree. I think culturally we have to examine what we are teaching our young boys and young girls about what it means to be a boy and what it means to be a girl. It's just, there's a lot of problems with how what we expose our children to very young, in media and video games and that. It's just, here we have, every year. And I can remember, I don't know, years ago being just really disturbed by all the little grammar school girls dressed in very skimpy little outfits and doing very sexualized dances down the middle of the street, as part of the parade. And there's just so many ways that we teach little girls that, they should be cute and provocative and flirtatious. But then we don't teach them what the consequences of that can be. We don't teach them, we don't, at least here in the States, we don't teach sex ed. We don't teach children about sexuality and how to express it and how do you respect somebody's boundaries. We don't teach any of that. We just teach our children how to be sexual. It's a mess.
Or like
So,
they do, a lot of sex ed here is how to put a condom on a banana, not to understand that, psychologically hormones are doing this in your system, and this is what it means, and this is how amazing you're wired, and, the fact that you do this, you're given this, you perceive this way. People don't even know that females and males have a different ratio of retina cells that cause them either to be more focused or more peripheral. These little things, they mean they add into perception, and it means men perceive in a certain way and women perceive in a different way. And yes, it's the same event occurring, but the fact that we're a different sex does add a filter to our filters. So there's the conditioning, there's epigenetics, nature, nurture, but there's also, to deny the sex filter is to deny reality. And we're biologically, either have a uterus, which means we've got all the wiring and all the fuel with hormones and that are required to run that thing, and that thing runs on a cycle and affects emotions and perceptions. And that means a woman can perceive the exact same event through different filters depending on what hormones are in what ratio in her body. And I want to teach that very simply to guys so that they don't give women, there's this girls are crazy. Women have a big, book like this and we'll never understand them, and men have a little book like this. Have you ever seen those comic memes out there? The book of understanding a woman is this big, and a man. And all it is, it's just a lack of education, and isn't it?
I agree. It absolutely is. We don't understand why, and it's like pulling teeth down. In particular, in the States and the South, it's really bad. We just, abstinence. Just don't have sex. That's at least until you get married. So it's a mess. It's
Yeah.
complete.
Well,
and I think it leads to a lot of exploitation of little girls, and it teaches a lot of boys that in order to be a man, they have to be able to get a woman to want to comply and meet their sexual needs. I mean, it's just so many poor messages that we give to our very young children, and that they grow up trying to make sense out of. So I would love to see us transform that starting at a very early age. That would be wonderful.
That's what I've realised. We're all screwed up from when we were before the age of 21, And so so I think that's where we need to go if we want to make cyclical change and really get in and break the intergenerational patterning, because we're in a right mess right now. And, this is an epidemic of women, who have experienced, especially child sexual abuse. They grow up and, they never get to enjoy sex. And that's, it's nature. It's okay. But it's so sad how many women tell me they hate sex.
Yeah, I think there was a period in my life when I was so angry about being sexually abused when I was so young, because it introduces you to sex at an age when your brain is not prepared to cope, to understand it, doesn't know where to put it, doesn't even know what to call it, and it introduces all of this confusion. So as I moved into adolescence, it all became very amplified and even more confusing, because, now my hormones are starting to go, and it brings up, it triggered me. It was like all of this confusion around it, and it leads to a lot of poor choices. It leads to a lot of self-inflicted, just feeling badly about yourself because you keep making poor choices and you don't understand why. And as far as sex, I think it took me a really long time to sort out what when with sex, what was mine and what was someone else's, because I never, as a child, it's always someone else's. Whatever you're doing, it's for them, and whatever pleases you, wherever your pleasure comes, doesn't even occur to you. That's some part of the equation. So it was really hard for me to kind of assert myself sexually, to say this is what I want, because there was so much guilt and shame around it. And I think a lot of survivors struggle with that. They struggle with and it takes years. It takes years and years and years. And I had lots of therapy. So, and it was a process, and I'm sure that I could continue to improve. There's always something to be worked out, and that's the tragedy of it. I got past being angry and just became sad. That what could it have been like? What would my sexual experience, my growth and my mature, as I moved through, what would it have been like? It would have been probably so much more beautiful and satisfying and interesting and exciting and fun, whereas it's kind of torture for me.
And that's so common. And what you're saying there, going through the anger and now feeling sad, it's a very typical of a grief cycle. I wonder whether, you know, girls are grieving for their lost female essence.
But maybe that coming of age, you know, I read books about women, girls, young women coming of age sexually, and I'm always so like, it's so, I go from being envious and like, oh, is that what it's like? Because mine wasn't like that, you know.
No,
Mine wasn't.
but it's you know, it's just common that women, you know, I was raped at gunpoint on my 18th birthday. That's my memory of coming of age. In Australia, it's 18, you know, and it's just absolutely, you know, incredible that we have, you know, the price we've paid as well. It's, and you know, there's all.
This part is so common. After this Tony Robbins things, my cousins who I loved and I hung out with, you know, as a child, whenever we get together at holidays or we just go visit, my mother had a big family. And they've all, you know, several of them have come out, you know, to talk about their own sexual abuse. And it's just like, here we all were being abused, and by different men. Like none of us have the same abuser, and yet none of us knew it. And yet, and I'm not surprised. It just is so common.
Nanine, I was sitting one day and there were 8 women, and you know, we got on the subject of it, and I said, yeah, you know, I was abused. And do you know that all 8 had been abused? And the other thing is they say it's 1 in 3, but in my family, it's 3 out of 3. My own 3 daughters were sexually abused, and I was the one that was going to protect them and make sure that never happened. And it still happened, and it happened by family. And, you know, it's almost like for me, I was adding energy into it occurring by fighting so hard for it not to happen, because I didn't want that for my kids. And then it happened. And I just, you know, it's almost like ironic, but it can't, you know, how much irony can there be before you realize this is a pattern? And that's what caused me to study the science of epigenetics and to go down the history route and realize what women have really suffered and been through. No wonder women are scared of being thin. We were weighed, and if you were underweight, you were assumed to be a witch and living on herbs, so they would kill you. And so, you know, it makes sense that, you know, and that was a 300-year reign of terror on women where 9 million women were killed. That's a Holocaust. That's a Holocaust, but no one talks about it. And the only crime was being a woman. So they gave them a label. They said, oh, we'll call them a witch. And, you know, you weren't allowed to heal, or you weren't allowed to be a woman, because if you were, you feared death. So no wonder we feel lost and we can't put our finger on it. But, you know, it's now proven scientifically that we inherit those traumas until they're resolved. And I feel like it's all coming to a head, and I feel like that, you know, that what you represent is bigger than you and me and girls right now. I feel that I want to represent the little girls of the future, and I want to break that cycle. And that's why I wanted to talk to you. I feel like if little girls in the future can look back and see this unassuming woman who's just stood up in an arena, if she can do that, then, you know, we can break this cycle. It's possible.
It is. But I think I do want to say that where you stand up is important, because there is a very real threat,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
You can lose your job, and lots of women can't afford to lose their jobs because they have children they're supporting by themselves. You know, you can lose your career, but most of all, you can lose your life. So I think I do worry that, you know, standing up in an arena full of 10,000 people, 10,000 witnesses, I was pretty safe.
And yet and yet humiliation, public humiliation is considered one of the biggest fears to a lot of people.